Venezuelans mobilized to march for peace and against U.S. sanctions, while the U.N. Human Rights Council heard divergent views on the situation in the country. The Dominican Republic saw massive demonstrations calling for respect for democracy. And Russia announced a referendum on constitutional amendments to be held on April 22nd. Hi from the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm Cristina Escobar. We begin in Venezuela, where thousands marched in Caracas on Thursday to commemorate the 31st anniversary of the Caracazo uprising against neoliberalism. The march, called the World Against Neoliberalism, was convened by the United Socialist Party of Venezuela and supported by social and political movements. This Thursday also saw global mobilization in solidarity with Venezuela and rejecting the unilateral sanctions of the U.S. government against the Bolivarian nation. February 27th marks Venezuela's Day of Respect for Human Rights, coinciding with the anniversary of the Caracazo uprising of 1989, when residents of Caracas took to the streets to protest against a package of neoliberal measures adopted by the government of Carlos Andrés Pérez. The ensuing demonstrations, rioting and looting were met with heavy repression by state security forces, leaving thousands dead. And we turn to Geneva now, where the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, presented her annual report this Thursday. Bachelet referred to the deep inequalities that are fueling protests in Latin America, particularly in Chile and Ecuador. In the framework of the 43rd session of the Human Rights Council, Bachelet also raised concern about the restrictive migration policy of the United States, especially the detention of minors. She also noted deaths due to police operations against demonstrators in Bolivia. The High Commissioner also declared that the activities of social movements in Brazil are not respected, while she encouraged the Colombian government to implement the 2016 peace deal to stop the wave of violence against human rights activists there. And on the fourth day of the 43rd session of the UN Human Rights Council, the High Commissioner referred to the situation in Venezuela. Bachelet highlighted the cooperation of the Bolivarian government, noting the progress made in technical cooperation. The Commissioner's office took note of the release of 14 people in the month of January, a result of the dialogue process between the Venezuelan government and sectors of the opposition. However, Bachelet also made accusations regarding prisoners supposedly detained for political motives in Venezuela.
My office also started.
Venezuela's Deputy Minister of Multilateral Affairs, Alexander Yáñez, presented the country's response to Bachelet's accusations, noting that the Venezuelan government remains fully willing to cooperate with the office of the High Commissioner.
Thank you, President. We take note of the report read out by the High Commissioner. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela reiterates its serious and quite founded questions related to the methodology used by the Office of the High Commissioner to prepare reports on country situations. Still, a lot needs to be done to have balanced reports that are based on the principles that should rule all the questions related to human rights. Despite this fact, Venezuela renews its readiness to carry out a dialogue and cooperate with the Office of the High Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet. The team of the office in Venezuela has received full support of the competent authorities of the Venezuelan state to carry out its mission with strict compliance with the principles of international law established by the United Nations Charter. Also, we have received the visit of the officials of the office based in Geneva and the regional office for South America to move in that direction. As a result, the Memorandum of Understanding and the work plan signed at the end of 2019 are strengthening cooperation and technical assistance on different issues in human rights, including the development of the second National Human Rights Plan.
The Venezuelan Deputy Minister also denounced the illegal, unilateral, coercive measures imposed by the United States against the state-run Conviasa airline, which prevents Venezuela from providing humanitarian assistance to its citizens stranded in other countries who wish to return home.
Venezuelan air company Conviasa is suffering from these measures, a company that has developed extraordinary work of a humanitarian nature to facilitate the return to the country of Venezuelans that decided to migrate as a result of the economic aggression against Venezuela. Also, steps taken by the United States support this hateful and illegal campaign against Venezuela, and this involves companies that trade in Venezuelan oil. It is an attempt to deprive the Venezuela state of its main source of income, with a significant impact of human rights. Once again, we denounce here in the Council the obsessive persecution carried out by the government of the United States of Venezuelan people. This is without doubt a systematic and generalized attack against civilian populations. This is a crime against humanity. To conclude, 31 years after the massacre known as the Caracazo taking place in Venezuela by governments promoting liberal policies, the Bolivarian government ratifies its full commitment to human rights and cooperation with this Council and the Office of the High Commissioner. Human rights should not be used as a weapon to cover strategies of regime change that only lead to violence, suffering, and violation of human rights. Thank you, Madam President.
And in its 2019 report on Colombia, the UN stressed a lack of security guarantees and an increase in violence against human rights defenders in the South American country. The report makes recommendations regarding access to justice and the transformation of the Colombian police mobile anti-disturbance squadron, accused of excessive use of force by police during recent social protests. The UN Human Rights Office urged the Colombian government to initiate thorough, effective, and independent investigations into these cases. The report also stresses the need for a comprehensive program of guarantees for women, social leaders, and human rights defenders as an important tool for prevention and protection against assassinations and attacks. More than 100 human rights defenders and 66 indigenous people were killed in Colombia last year. Critics have slammed President Iván Duque for not doing enough to stop the violence. At least 18 people have died and more than 11,000 have seen their homes damaged in Bolivia due to heavy rains. The Ministry of Defense informed on Wednesday that 16 municipalities are now in a state of emergency. The city of Tiquipaya, in the department of Cochabamba, is the worst affected by flooding. Bolivians say they have been abandoned by the de facto government and claim that self-proclaimed President Yanin Áñez has visited affected areas purely as a photo op. El Salvador's Congress approved a reconciliation law on Wednesday that is strongly criticized by victims of civil war and human rights organizations. The legislative approved a special law on transitional justice reparation and national reconciliation, which will be applicable to any person who committed crimes against humanity and war crimes constituting serious violations of international humanitarian law during the armed conflict from 1980 to 1992. Civil society organizations are opposed to the law as it gives judges the power to reduce sentences when those accused accept the responsibility for these crimes and ask the victims for forgiveness. Critics claim the law will lead to further impunity rather than long-awaited justice. Coming up, the Dominican Republic saw a massive demonstration calling for respect for democracy. More details after the break. Hi, welcome back. And we begin in the Dominican Republic, which saw a massive protest in Santo Domingo this Thursday, calling for respect for democracy and commemorating the 176th anniversary of the country's independence. Our correspondent, Daisy Toussaint, brings us more details.
Hello, greetings. 12 days of consecutive protests are seeking clarification about what happened during the municipal elections on February 16. At this moment, in Flag Square, the 2020 commemoration of the Trabucazo protest is being held, on the same day as the Dominican Republic's independence is celebrated. President Danilo Medina offered his last State of the Nation address. This demonstration is to demand guarantees for the upcoming elections and for the vote and popular will to be respected, and for a transparent and reliable process. It is called to maintain order and to protest peacefully as protesters have done so far.
The President of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, offered his last State of the Nation address before Congress this Thursday. Medina presented his annual report to the legislative body in the midst of the ongoing protest over the suspension and rescheduling of the municipal elections. Social organizations have questioned Medina's administration, although the country saw economic growth in 2019. Preparations continue in Guyana for the March 2nd general and regional elections. Government Commissioner Vincent Alexander stated that measures are being taken to guarantee free and fair elections. The Guyana Election Commission has met to iron out certain issues, he reported, including matters raised by the opposition regarding the reduction in the use of private residences as polling stations in the upcoming elections. And just days before Guyana's head to the polls, the country's political parties are racing to secure votes. General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, Bharat Jagdeo, has expressed a strong condemnation of the decision by the Elections Commission to reduce the use of private residences as polling stations and instead use public buildings. The Elections Commission chairman reported that this decision is in keeping with recommendations from the Carter Center following allegations of voter suppression by the opposition. Meanwhile, President David Granger has urged thousands of supporters of the ruling Partnership for National Unity Alliance for Change to go out and vote next Monday to ensure the dark days under the previous administration are not repeated. And the past few weeks have seen a series of fake news stories about Guyana. This comes at a time when the Guyana Press Association has been working alongside the Guyanese media fraternity and the Elections Commissions to curtail practices that result in misinformation. Mainstream media editors are urging citizens to be careful with what they share on social media following a proliferation of fake social media profiles using news agencies' names and spreading fake political stories. The novel coronavirus in China could be brought under control by late April as the country continues to see a decline in the death toll from the epidemic, according to a Chinese expert speaking on Thursday. Speaking at a conference in Guangzhou City, South China, renowned Chinese respiratory expert Shun Nanshan said that he is confident in the prevention and control measures that have been adopted and stands by the prediction made by his team. The COVID-19 virus has now infected around 82,000 and resulted in 2,800 deaths. The virus has now spread to at least 47 nations, with the United States and Germany reported the first cases with no obvious source of transmission. And World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said on Thursday that the coronavirus outbreak has reached a decisive point. In Europe, Denmark, Estonia, Norway and Romania have all reported their first coronavirus cases, while several other countries have registered new infections that illustrate the diverse ways the virus can cross borders. Meanwhile, Japan is to ask all schools to close from Monday to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. The closure, thought to affect 13 million students, will continue until the school year ends in late March. Saudi Arabia temporarily suspended entry for individuals seeking to undertake the Umrah pilgrimage to Mecca or visit the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, as well as tourists traveling from countries where the coronavirus poses a risk as determined by the kingdom's health authorities. The new measures seek to prevent the emergence of the coronavirus in Saudi Arabia, according to a statement shared on Twitter by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. These measures come at a time when there has been a sharp increase in the number of cases reported in the Middle East, where most of the individuals infected had visited Iran, which has reported a death toll of 19, the highest outside China. After this break, Russia has announced a referendum on constitutional amendments to be held on April 22nd. Stay with us for more. The Russian parliament agreed to hold a nationwide vote on April 22nd to allow Russians to have their say on a series of amendments to the country's constitution. On January 15th, Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed to convene a constitutional referendum on amendments, including the granting of greater powers to the State Duma or lower house. Addressing both houses of parliament, Putin proposed that the Duma vote on the Prime Minister's candidacy, on which until now it was limited to offering its approval. Julian Assange has requested to leave a dog surrounded by bulletproof glass and sit with his lawyer after he complained of being as much a participant in the proceedings during his extraditional trial as watching Wimbledon. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete has the story.
The Woolwich Crown Court, it's day 4 of the Julian Assange extradition trial. It was set for 5 days, but there are reports that it will be ending early today. Now, this is the trial that will initiate to see whether Julian Assange will be extradited to the US to face 18 charges, including espionage, which would mean that he could face up to 175 years in prison. As we know, in April, he was arrested by the British police from the Ecuadorian embassy, where he had been given a political assignment initially by the Rafael Correa government, but under Lenin Moreno, the current president of Ecuador, this was rescinded and he was effectively expelled from the embassy and has been held next door here at the Belmarsh High Security prison. We've heard from his lawyers how on the first day of the trial he was handcuffed 11 times, strip searched twice, and there have been grave concerns about his treatment whilst in Belmarsh, and also a lot of criticism of the behaviour of the judge and in general the legal process up to now by the British state. So this is day 4 of the extradition trial for Julian Assange to determine whether he will be extradited to the US to face charges of espionage for releasing classified US government material.
The African Union said on Thursday that it expected to send a temporary deployment of 3,000 troops to West Africa's Sahel region, where regional forces have been struggling to respond to insurgency by armed Islamists for nearly 8 years. The decision was made at the African Union summit earlier this month, according to Smail Shergood, head of the AU's Peace and Security Commission, but was not officially announced until a press conference on Thursday. A localized rebellion that began in northern Mali in 2012 has spread to the center of the country and to neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. Around 4,000 people were killed in the 3 countries last year, a 5-fold increase over 2016 according to UN figures. Tunisia's new government secured a parliamentary vote of confidence on Thursday after more than 4 months of political wrangling since the elections. Former Finance Minister Els Fakfak was named Prime Minister designated by Tunisia's President Kais Saied at the end of January and tasked with forming a government within a month. The previous cabinet he put forward was rejected by the Islamist-inspired Enad movement party, which won the most seats in October's legislative elections, but fell far short of a majority in the assembly. FACFAC's revised lineup secured 129 votes in favor and 77 against after a debate which started on Wednesday and lasted more than 14 hours. And finally, donkey slaughter will be halted in Kenya following concerns over the rise in theft of the animals for export and the impact on families that rely on them. According to the country's Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. The ban is necessary because rampant slaughtering of donkeys has led to job losses in places where they are a centerpiece of everyday life, according to Peter Munja, Cabinet Secretary for the Agriculture Ministry. Donkeys often represent an essential lifeline for farmers who use them for transport, domestic work and milk. Donkey populations globally are under serious threat due to the demand for their hides, which are used in traditional Chinese medicine, according to a 2019 report by the Donkey Sanctuary, a UK-based charity. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Cristina Escobar. Thank you so much for watching.